Alright, we are going to get a little bit nerdy for this one. I see this comment all over the internet and I wanted to see if I could add at least something to the conversation. Is Planet Coaster poorly optimized? Well, to answer this, we sort of need to answer a different question first, because overtime slowdown isn't just a Planet Coaster problem, it's all Tycoon games. So we probably should first answer the question, why do all open-ended Tycoon games slow down over time? Open-ended, open-world Tycoon games rely on the player building up a universe from the ground up. You start with nothing on a map and you build your world into something that you've created, not something that the game has been able to pre-render. That essentially means the game has to go from being completely empty and having nothing to animate or process, to having to animate and process everything you've put into the world. Now this, of course, over time means that your system needs to be able to cope with all of this onslaught of calculations, animations, interconnected systems, APIs and all the databases, all of that sort of stuff. Now, lucky for us, there are game engines that can do this for us. Unity, Unreal, you know the players. Planet Coaster is built on Frontier's own game engine, Cobra. And without getting too technical here, a game engine is a resource manager for anything and everything the game needs to do, and it requests and allocates all of the hardware resources to function correctly. So, if the game needs more RAM or more CPU, the game engine does that for you. But, in order for this to actually work, the game engine needs to talk to your system. It can't just magically do that. Now this is where DirectX on Windows comes into it. To keep this really simple, because you probably don't care anyway, DirectX is a lot of things. It's basically the connector between your PC and what you're doing on the PC or the game that you're playing, and these are called APIs. It's basically lots of little bits of code that make things run, and when you deal with games and in particular graphics in our context, DirectX is a thing that among loads of other things helps create this visual representation of all of this code. The game asks the system to do something, DirectX decides if you need to see it and then makes it do it. But why is any of this relevant? Well, remember when we said that the game has to go from having to animate and process nothing to having to animate and process everything? When you have a game like GTA, the world and the game limits are already set. They don't really expand much from what you initially load into the game with, and this means that the developers can start to find efficiencies in that code, universally, right across the game. Now, things like draw distances, only calculating processes for what you need at any one single moment, only creating the world for what you need there and then, all that sort of stuff. However, with Tycoon games, you need to calculate every single location of every single thing at any one single time. So, all of that off-screen stuff needs to be taken care of. Guest locations, ride sequences, train progression on tracks, just in case you change your field of vision and go and visit them. The game needs to know exactly where everything is at any one moment. This is also true in GTA, of course, but it's not as extreme in nature. Now, as you play a Tycoon game, you are adding tiny little bits to the world every single time you add something. The more you add, the more resources are needed to make it all happen. You can't completely optimize any of this at universal level, so what you can do is optimize as many bits as you can for the tiny little things instead. There's a drawback with this though. Every tiny little thing that you add to your world eventually adds up to one massive thing, and that is where the problem with Tycoon games is. You can optimize each of those individual tiny things to be as efficient on its own and hope that when you bring it all together it doesn't make one massive ugly thing because they don't play nicely as a group of things. Of course, you can optimize how each of these tiny things interacts with each other when it's a big ugly thing, but it's still never perfect because of the unlimited number of combinations of tiny little things that make a big thing. You can't just code for them all. And that's a lot of nerdy words to tell you that the more you add to your world, the slower your PC is going to be because the PC has to calculate it all. This is also the reason why the Oswald counter exists on console. There are so many other reasons that your game may slow down though. We're going to talk a lot about CPU in a moment, but other factors that can slow your game down are the amount and speed of your RAM, the speed and available space on your hard drive, the speed of your fastest single CPU core, plus its generation and age, the graphics card that you're using, background programs which uses the resources that Planet Coaster could be using instead, your calling method and your system stress temperatures, and even dust in your base unit. Yes, dust slows a PC down. And all of this often leads to gaming bros with zero experience in coding who run potatoes as computers demanding that the game just be better. I mean, if it were that simple, don't you think it would be? And more to the point, wouldn't the problem be exclusive to one game and not an entire genre? Okay, so we're a couple of minutes in and we need to really answer the exam question. Is Planet Coaster poorly optimized? Well, In sorts, yes, and in sorts, no. Let's start with the yes first, shall we? The addition of Theme Maker's Toolkit, that's TMTK, and the autosave, in my opinion, are poorly optimised. It shouldn't take 10 minutes to load into the start menu, and it shouldn't take 20 minutes for an autosave to complete. Something is clearly wrong there, but you know what? I have no idea what. I'm just a gaming bro demanding better performance of something that I don't like and I don't understand, but that's not the main part of the game system, so, you know, that's not your overall answer. Alright, so Planet Coaster is built on DirectX 11. Frontier had to make this really awkward decision in 2014 on whether to design the game for the currently available hardware using DirectX 11 or future-proof it for future hardware using the then brand new DirectX 12. Basically, do you design the game for more sales now but limit the game's performance to accommodate aging but already existing hardware? Or later, where you sell fewer copies to start with, but at least the game is future-proofed for hardware that doesn't exist yet, but it will in the future. Now, this is the reason that Planet Coaster is built on DirectX 11 and Planet Zoo is on DirectX 12. And the problem with all of this? Well, DirectX 11 does not have the ability to utilise multi-core CPUs in the way that DirectX 12 does, because back then, it didn't need to. Without getting too nerdy about this means that to get the most out of Planet Coaster, you need to play to DirectX 11's strengths. The faster your single core performance of your CPU, the better Planet Coaster runs, as it cannot effectively utilise additional cores. I mean, it does use multi-core, but a lot of the calculations are bound to the single core thread. So, the faster and more efficient the core, the better your game runs. As time's gone by, CPUs have got better, faster and more efficient, and you would of course see the game performing better as a result. This increased performance isn't just because the game has magically used all of those extra cores you purchased, but because the faster single core is being used more efficiently. DirectX 11 just isn't coded to manage that because it didn't need to back when it was released. But why don't they just update DirectX 11 then? Well, they did. They released DirectX 12, and 13 is also coming. And now the good news is that Planet Zoo and presumably Planet Coaster 2 are all based on the new version of Cobra and DirectX 12. Now this means in theory they should run better than the original did, but based on what we've talked about here today, you still shouldn't expect 60 frames a second from your megaparks. That's just unrealistic. Put that to bed straight away. Now there is of course a complete counter-argument to all of this, which I think we should probably take a moment to at least acknowledge. In 2024, some developers are either poorly skilled at coding, or they become so lazy that they know that hardware on the market is more than plenty powerful enough to deal with their poor coding. There is of course no incentive to find optimization efficiencies like there were in the early 2000s, where the lower limit of the game specifications wasn't far from the upper limit of the hardware performance at the time. So, any tiny improvement represented a massive performance improvement. We've seen this play out many times recently, but Roller Coaster Tycoon World, I am looking at you for this one. Now thankfully, this isn't the case across the board, and I can say with a degree of confidence that Planet Coaster does not suffer with this like other games do. Is it perfect? No. Is it bad? Also no. And yes, I have way oversimplified this to make this even remotely watchable, and I know I'm not a coder or an expert, but I am a good researcher, and I'm also a trainer by trade, so thankfully this counts for something, right? And I mean, I'm sure this is going to be a very divisive topic, but hopefully I have shed some light on why Planet Coaster and other Tycoon games run like they do. But there is only one way to tell how Planet Coaster 2 is going to perform. Let's just go ahead and play it, shall we?